press it down. Okay.
All right, so we're gonna do more heart and blood. It's gonna be so amazing, okay? So let's just get started. All right, so we have our little picture here that we diagrammed. So basically what we're going to talk about at this point is how the effectiveness of the heart contractions measured through cardiac output. And then also we're going to talk about blood vessels and blood itself. So it's going to be a great time. All right, so cardiac output is the amount of blood ejected per minute from the left ventricle into the aorta. In other words, how much blood is coming out of your heart. This is determined by two things: the stroke volume, which is SV. This is the amount of blood coming out, and then your heart rate, which is how many times your heart beats per minute. So if you want to calculate cardiac output, you multiply stroke volume times heart rate, and that gives you how much blood you're putting out. So the example here is 70 mils. This is just a typical example. So 70 mils per beat times 75 beats per minute, you end up with 5,250 mils per minute, or 5.25 liters. So it's usually measured in liters. So there's how you do it. So if you increase stroke volume, you increase cardiac output. So an example of that would be exercise. So if I start to exercise, my blood is going to be pumping harder and faster and more blood, and so that's going to increase cardiac output, not only because my heart rate is up, but also because I'm pumping more blood. Okay, so I don't know if y'all have ever run for any distance, but my heart always feels like it's going to explode. It's a really good experience for me. And so this is why, okay, so I'm really increasing my cardiac output. This is also why we were talking about athlete's heart. The better shape you're in, the less hard your body has to work. Okay, so the less beats that your heart has to do to get the same amount of output, because it's squeezing harder and has more volume coming out, and so basically it has to beat less amount of times to get the same amount of blood out. So that's how that works. All right, so there is a law that's kind of associated with this. It's called the Frank-Starling law of the heart, which says the more you stretch the heart, the more forcefully it contracts. So that's what Frank-Starling law says. Basically, it's like a rubber band. If I stretch a rubber band out really far, it will shoot really far, right? Because it contracts harder. If I stretch it just a little bit, it will not shoot very far because I haven't stretched it very far. Okay, so the heart, is a muscle, so working on it and exercising obviously will increase the physical fitness of the heart due to the fact that it is working like a muscle, because it is a muscle. So the forcefulness of contraction of individual ventricular muscle fibers is due to the stimulation of sympathetic nervous system. Okay, so if your sympathetic nervous system is fight and flight, what do you think that's going to do to your heart rate? Increase your heart rate. Okay, so sympathetic is going to drive everything up. So it increases the heart beat rate and stroke volume. Inhibition of sympathetic nervous system, like acidosis or anesthetics, will lower the heart rate, and that will obviously lower the stroke volume as well. If the pressure required to eject the blood from the ventricles, if the pressure becomes dysregulated, it can cause stroke volume to decrease. So blood pressure has a lot to do with how your body regulates stroke volume. All right, so regulation of the heart rate. SA node is going to be responsible for controlling how fast your heart is beating. This is going to originate in the cardiovascular center of the medulla oblongata. So do y'all remember that thing from 201? Okay, it's your brain stem. And increase through the norepinephrine release by the cardiac accelerator nerves, which is a sympathetic nervous response. Basically, you can speed your heart rate up by adding epinephrine or norepinephrine. You can decrease it by adding acetylcholine. So that's a parasympathetic response, and that's going to happen through your vagal nerve. Okay, so if you've ever heard of having a vagal response to something, I hadn't ever heard of it until it happened to me. Okay, so you can have like a vagal response to pain, you pass out. Okay, some people have a vagal response to like blood or any sort of like, yeah, any sort of thing like that, and you pass out, that's a vagal response. Basically, your heart rate drops, your blood pressure drops, and, well, you drop. Okay, so I also get these if I get stomach virus, which is why I'm always like so scared to get the stomach virus, because when I get the stomach virus, I pass out. It's the weirdest thing ever. Okay, so if I throw up, I pass out. It's just how it works.
It's really popular with men while they're using the bathroom.
Yeah, it does happen. Lots of people die on the toilet, actually. We were talking about this, Natalie and I were talking about it, because you push to get things out, and that puts pressure on the vagal nerve, and then you pass out or die.
And then you die.
So yeah.
That's how
My friend and I
that's
had a
how I want
pact.
to go right there.
My friend and I had a pact with each other. This was before I got married, because now my husband and I have this pact. Okay, if I die on the toilet, please pull my pants up before the paramedics get there. So that's just the pact, all right? So that's a little bit of personal information about me, okay? So just, use that with caution. All right, so anyway, so how does your body know what your heart rate is doing? There are baroreceptors, so baro means pressure. So think about barometric pressure, you know what I'm talking about? When a storm's about to come, you feel it feels weird. Okay, that's the barometric pressure. You have baroreceptors. These are going to respond to blood pressure changes. You have them in the aorta and also in the carotid artery. So you're measuring the pressure going out to your body and also the pressure going to your head. What's in your head that you don't want to blow up? Your brain. Okay, so you need to monitor the pressure of the blood flowing to your head. There are also chemoreceptors in your tissues, which respond to chemical changes. So how much oxygen do you have in your blood and how much carbon dioxide do you have in your blood? Hormones, they're back. Okay, so different hormones that are going to regulate your heart. Epinephrine is going to increase heart rate. Norepinephrine is going to increase heart rate. Thyroid hormones also increase heart rate. Okay, so remember they're responsible for metabolism. So they're going to increase heart rate. Hyperthyroidism, which means too much thyroid hormone, is going to present sometimes with tachycardia, which means increased heart rate, so fast heartbeat. Different ions, potassium, sodium, will decrease heart rate. Calcium increases heart rate and contraction force. Other things that can kind of outside of that regulate your heart rate, your age. So like babies have a faster heart rate, especially like if you go to the doctor like when you're pregnant, they check the fetus heart rate, and it's usually really fast, like it's over 100, between like 100, 150, well, it's like 120, 150. Okay, so quick heartbeat, also gender, so male or female, and physical fitness. The more physically fit you are, the lower your resting heart rate is. All right, so that's all for that. How are y'all feeling? Pretty good? Okay, good. All right. No news is good news. Okay. So we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about blood vessels. So in your textbook, the blood is kind of its own separate chapter. So heart is one chapter, and then blood vessels, I think, are another complete chapter. So basically, if we talk about it in class, that's what I want you to focus on. There's a lot of information there, but if we talk about it in class, that's what you should be most concerned with, okay? All right, so let's talk a little bit about the blood vessels. There's arteries and veins, okay? So arteries are going away from the heart. Arterioles are small arteries, and then capillaries are kind of in between veins and arteries. Veins go back to the heart, so they return blood to the heart, and then venules are small veins. There are what are called blood reservoirs, your intestines and guts. Basically, the veins of your abdominal organs kind of hold the blood. They can be quickly diverted from those areas to muscle if you need to get somewhere. Okay, so basically, when you're sitting there resting and digesting, you have a larger reservoir of blood kind of in your digestive system versus fight or flight or moving or exercise. That would require the blood to be in your muscles instead of in your intestines. So this is the basic structure of arteries, veins, and capillaries. So this is chapter 19. This is a figure from your textbook. This is going to kind of show you how they're all connected to each other, okay? So if we look up here at this side is going to be the arteries. They're going to flow down the arteries away from the heart, the blood, okay? It'll flow through the capillary networks and then back into the veins, back to the heart, okay? So like for instance, if we were talking about having like blood starting, I don't know, in
Big toe.
the big toe, okay? So if we have blood flowing down, let's say the femoral artery, okay, then it's going to branch out to the fibula or whatever, and then it's going to run on down to that front area of your foot, okay? Once it gets to the tissue, the big toe tissue, it's got to go from that little artery through the capillary, back up to the vein, and then that vein is going to bring it all the way
God,
back.
how does it bring it all the way back up to the...
We'll talk about that. It's through your muscle pumps, okay? So as you're contracting your muscles, it's squeezing the veins. Also the pressure that's pushing from the other side, the arteries, kind of push it through, and you kind of milk it back up to the heart, all right? So that's why, like if you're on a long flight or on a long car ride, sometimes like your feet would swell or something like that. You gotta get up and get your blood pumping, okay? Move it on back up to the heart, all righty? All right, so here are the different things. I'm going to show you real quick on here. There are 3 tunics or layers. They're called tunicas, not like Tunica, Mississippi.
What happens when you don't have, say you had a vein removed? Does
Yes.
it put pressure on the rest of the veins to work?
Yeah, you can. It'll just divert. Also, like if you have varicose veins, basically that's like a faulty valve, and so the blood can't like get. It's not pushing or holding at that point, and so it can divert to other places. And veins are very specific to the individual. So like when you, like if you dissected a cadaver, this cadaver's veins are nothing like the cadaver next to it. So they're similar, but there's a lot of anastomosis so that they can kind of divert around and get back to the heart. There's a lot of alternative pathways.
So everybody's body is different.
It is. Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. So every summer, well not every summer, but like sometimes in the summer, the past 3 summers and the summer, I'll go to like a cadaver camp at UAB where basically we work to learn more about anatomy through cadaver dissection. And you never dissect the veins because they're always different. The arteries are pretty standard in location, but the veins, they're just everywhere. Like there's just tons and they're all in different places. You can even look at your hands, like if you can see the veins in your arms, like this arm isn't even the same as this arm, or this hand isn't even the same as this hand. So, or your top of your feet, like I can see my veins in the top of my feet. They're different on both feet. So it's just how it works. So anyways, arteries, 3 tunicas. Tunica intima is the middle or the inside layer. Tunica media is the middle layer. Tunica externa is the hard outside layer. So here is a description of that. Tunica intima is this endothelium, which is like a thin epithelial layer or endothelial layer. Tunica media is the muscle layer. It's the middle. Then you have tunica externa. It's going to be elastic and collagen fibers, so it's tougher. So your blood vessels are tough on the outside. So if you've ever had to like draw blood or anything, you know the needle's very sharp. And if it's not, sometimes it can like, the blood vessel kind of move out of the way.
Yeah, and it wiggles.
Yeah, and that's rough because then they have to just keep digging. It's a good time. All right? So all of these are surrounded, the hollow space in the middle is called the lumen. So lumen is like the inside of the blood vessel. So when you hear that, that's what we're talking about. Here's another picture, an artistic rendition, okay? So you can see collagen elastic fibers, tunica externa, smooth muscle, tunica media, and endothelium, tunica intima. And then in the middle is the hole where the blood flows. All right, so arteries and arterioles, we're talking about oxygenated blood, for the most part, flowing away from the heart, is going to have what's called vasoconstriction. Basically, those the smooth muscle layer around the vessel can squeeze and tighten. This will decrease the diameter and the lumen of the blood vessel and increase blood pressure. So think about a water hose, okay? If you're just washing your car, you just wet it with a water hose, right? You got a bug stuck on there, what do?
Pressure.
Put your finger on the end of it and spray the bug. Are y'all familiar with this? One time I tried to wash my car with a pressure washer, knocked the paint slam off of it. So I was like, not gonna do that again. Okay, so how does a pressure washer work? Well, you got this thing over here and it's like putting pressure. But then the hole that the water comes out is super small, right? And so it's super high pressure. And so if you decrease the size of the tube, it's gonna increase the pressure. Same thing with your body, decrease blood vessel size, increase pressure. Yes.
All of a sudden you're ripping skin off of somebody.
Yeah, for the record, underneath black paint, white plastic. On the bumper. Found that out the hard way. You know what will fix that? A Sharpie. Okay? No one ever found
He's
out.
paying a whole lot of money.
Yeah, see? I mean,
Yeah.
hundreds of dollars to get my car painted
Yeah.
or a Sharpie. I chose a Sharpie. We all have our standards, right? Okay. So I did see a picture the other day of a tail light that was out and someone had like taped red Solo cups in there. Have y'all seen that? It's like a busted tail light with red Solo cups in it so the cop wouldn't like notice that it was out. I was like, that is genius. It was good. It was good. Okay. All right. So, why does your arteries contract? They're getting stimulation from the nervous system. So, sympathetic nervous system will cause everything to go up. Increased blood pressure is one of those things. So that would cause your blood vessels to squeeze and increase the pressure. If your blood vessel is damaged, let's say you cut yourself, that also squeezes off the blood flow. Okay. So you've heard stories about people like chopping their own arm off because it like gets stuck in something. Have y'all ever heard of like, what was that one about the rock climber and he like cut his arm off?
No. He fell down in a ravine.
Yes.
And wasn't it was it a arm or
leg?
his leg?
I don't know. He chopped something off.
He did.
His
It was like
arm.
a dull knife. Just a pocket
And then
knife.
he realized he couldn't cut through his bone. He knew he had to break his arm.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
And then
Nope.
cut through the break.
Y'all.
Nope, knocking myself out and dying.
I mean,
Nope.
he had drank his own urine and he wasn't urinating anymore or something like that. And
So he's like, all right, I'm gonna cut this off.
Yeah, he had to get out or die.
I did see a special on like Dateline where this guy didn't show up for work for a couple of days, and like his parents had left him to house sit. Okay, this is a true story. Left him to house sit, and so he's house sitting over the weekend. So the furnace messes up. So he walks down to the basement. It's like one of these big old furnaces, and sticks his hand into the furnace to try to fix it. He gets in, can't get out. So he's there all weekend. On Monday or Tuesday, I don't know, he decides, you know what, I'm screwed. Like, I gotta get out of here. So he takes a blade sharpener, like one of those little files, and just cuts through everything, except you have a very thick nerve packet that runs out under here, the brachial plexus, okay? And he couldn't get through that. So he had cut through everything but that little bundle of nerves right there. And someone from work realized he wasn't showing up for work and goes down to the house and finds him. He's there alive, but just like dangling
How do you
with the
not, like,
furnace.
die from, blood loss or something? Because he cut through the brachial artery.
He did, but vasoconstriction, like as you damage
everything
blood
off.
vessels, they shut down. So basically the blood stopped flowing out. Think about amputations, like back in the day.
So if it's like, if your arm gets cut off.
The bleeding will eventually stop.
It's gonna eventually stop.
The bleeding will stop, one way or the other.
Well, because my dad had investigated a case. He's a detective
Okay.
where a man had gotten drunk and tried to bar fight somebody, but he fell down a flight of stairs.
Okay.
And he had a switchblade, and he switchblade his brachial arteries right in that little spot
died.
right there, and died like within 30
Was
seconds.
he drunk?
Yes, he was very drunk.
So alcohol is a blood
Yeah,
thinner. So that's a bad combination in
okay.
general. But the damage may have been so severe, like if it was like.
And it was too fast to compensate
Yeah.
for it? Okay.
And it's so close to the heart. Like if you were down a little bit further,
Mhm.
like if you cut here, that probably wouldn't be a good situation anyway. So, I was watching Vikings. This is so off the course here, but I was watching Vikings and the dude's arm like gets shot with an arrow and it's like all festered up. And so they take like an axe and like they like put the axe in the fire and then the guy just like sticks it on his arm and it was like pop and hits it and it just like cuts his arm off and he was like, ugh! And then
he passes out from the pain.
and then he died of gangrene. That's another lecture. I'll see y'all in micro. Okay, no, anyway, let's go here. All right, so we have to have something to break up the monotony, right? Let's talk about random
Editing
body
that
parts
out.
getting cut off. Vasoconstriction. So your blood vessels have little muscles running around them. When they need to, they can constrict.
I think we
Okay.
diverted too far on the camera.
Huh? We're going too
On
far.
the camera we're recording.
Yeah, I know.
You're gonna have to edit all that out.
Okay, so you can just fast forward. All right, so vasodilation is going to increase blood vessel lumen. So if you have a decrease in blood pressure, so this will decrease blood pressure. So if you get riled up, your body's like, hey, we need to calm down, then you can decrease your blood pressure by increasing the blood vessel diameter. So the smooth muscle cells relax. This can either be from lack of stimulation. Also, nitric oxide will cause the vasoconstriction or vasodilation. All right, so capillaries, these are where arteries and veins connect. So basically, this is the site of gas exchange. So this is the site of gas exchange, capillaries. The number of capillaries varies with the number of the rate of the tissue that they serve, the metabolic rate. So if it has a high metabolic rate, it has lots of capillaries. If it has a low metabolic rate, it has few capillaries. So there's three types, continuous, fenestrated, and sinusoid. So continuous capillaries are what are in your skin and muscles, and basically they're very tight junctions, so they only will allow blood, oxygen and carbon dioxide and ions to kind of go through. The intercellular clefts allow for fluid passage and small solutes to pass. Okay?
This would be like play volleyball and you like hit it and it's got the little dots all over you?
Yes.
Is that the capillaries?
That is the capillaries. Also, like if you have like little red moles, like some people have little tiny red dots on their bodies, and that is like a bundle of capillaries right there under the skin.
Isn't that, when you press on your fingernail and it goes white, then it,
Yes.
isn't that the capillaries?
Yes, so all of these things where the blood kind of gets into the tissues is going to be the capillary action. Okay, so this is where your body feeds, or your like systems feed the tissues. Okay, that's the capillary action happening there. Now, continuous capillaries of the brain are unique. They do not have any holes whatsoever, hardly. Okay, very small, tiny holes. This is going to form what's called the blood-brain barrier. Basically, your blood is kind of sealed off from your brain. So the only thing that can kind of get through there is CO2 and oxygen and some various ions.
You don't want to have waste in your brain.
Right, and well, you do, but there's not a ton of passage, because think about if you had an infection in your blood. Okay, if you get an infection in your blood, you don't want that to go to your brain. Okay, so your body is protecting your brain at all costs. Okay, so it's like wrapping it in bone, and then there's lots of layers of fluid and tissue, and also the only access that other things like the outside has is to get in through the blood. So once it gets up there, it doesn't want stuff to be able to pass through into the brain. Tissue itself, this is why treating like brain cancer is super hard, because the chemo drugs can't pass through the blood-brain barrier. So that's like a big deal with brain tumor treatment. Continuous capillaries, so they're not going to have very much room for anything to pass through. So this is what they look like. You can see that the cells are going to be held together by these tight junctions. Okay, and so basically like fluids, like water, CO2, things like that. Water's gonna get out through pores, but anyway, you're gonna have that happening there, all right? Fenestrated capillaries will have pores called fenestrations. These are more soluble or more permeable. They're gonna function in the absorption of filtrate, so like small intestines, endocrine glands, and kidneys have these. Okay, so think about your glands needing to release hormones into the bloodstream. It's going to need to get through the blood vessels. That's going to happen through these types of capillaries. They look like this. You can see little holes. Okay. Sinusoid capillaries have fewer tight junctions, and they have very large lumens, and they also have large gaps in between the cells. The blood flow is very slow through here, and this is going to allow for modification. It also allows large molecules and blood cells to pass between the blood and the surrounding tissues. Okay, so things can get in and out very easily. These are going to be found only in the liver, the bone marrow, the spleen, and the adrenal medulla. You can see here that they're very holy and have lots of gaps, so things can get in and out pretty easily. All right. So capillary beds have what's called microcirculation. In other words, blood flows into the capillary. Let's look at a picture here. So you have an artery kind of going out to this terminal arteriole, and then the blood is going to kind of branch off into the capillary. Okay, you can see that it can go kind of out to the edge here, all right, and it also has one little tube that kind of connects it through the middle. So if you look around here, there are these little what are called sphincters on each side, which is a circular muscle, and basically it can kind of pinch the blood flow here. And so what happens is, like if your blood pressure drops, or let's say you get real cold, your body doesn't want the blood to get chilled. So you know how your like hands, your feet and toes, or toes and fingers kind of get cold first. You know what I'm talking about? So the blood kind of shuts off from going to all those tissues. It only goes through this main little thoroughfare here, to prevent blood from going all the way out and being exposed to hot, cold, whatever, okay? And so that's kind of how that happens. Also, if your blood pressure drops, you don't want blood all the way out here in all these little pieces. You want it to just kind of go through the middle where it has to be. All right, so let's look at words of that. You have basically what's called the terminal arteriole. That's kind of right before the capillary happens. The meta-arteriole is kind of in the middle. This is going to have that thoroughfare channel, which is going directly in between the artery and the arteriole and the venule. And that is that. So that's what I said. The precapillary sphincters regulate blood flow through those capillaries. All right. You can see that there. And so that's that. All right. Last up is venules and veins. These are the outer layers and thickest layer of the veins. Some veins contain valves to keep blood from flowing backwards, and this is what causes varicose veins. If those weaken, basically the blood kind of pools in that area where the valve kind of weakens. They lose their elasticity. They become varicose veins. The pressure in the veins is lower than it is in the arteries. That makes sense, right? Because in the arteries it's coming from the heart. It goes through the capillaries. By the time it makes it to the veins, it's a lower pressure. So this is how we collect blood from people, is through the vein, right? You don't collect arterial blood. When you go to give blood, they take it out of these little like superficial veins here. They don't like go down and take it out of your artery. If you hit an artery, it starts squirting. It's pretty disgusting, all right? So blood letting is less severe in veins versus arteries, and the blood is usually drawn from these. All right, so I was asked how the blood actually makes it back to the heart. It's going to have three ways that the body pulls blood back to the heart. The first one is the contractions of the heart. So basically, as the heart's contracting, it's pushing blood into the tissues, and that's basically moving out the oxygenated blood. Also, the pressure in the right ventricle is lower than the rest of the venules. So way down here on the bottom of the right side is the lowest pressure. So it's kind of acting like a vacuum. It's kind of sucking the blood back to it, okay, because the pressure is really low there, all right? So it's kind of pulling the blood back in. Also, you have the skeletal muscle pump, so every time you contract your muscles, it kind of squeezes and pushes the blood back to the heart. And the respiratory pump, every time you breathe, your thorax and abdomen kind of do like this, and that's going to push the blood back to the heart as well, all right? Blood pressure is going to be measured in millimeters of mercury. The blood flows from regions of high pressure to regions of low pressure. The contraction of the ventricles is going to generate your blood pressure. So the blood pressure is the highest in the aorta, all right? So highest in the aorta and lowest in the right ventricle. So highest in the aorta, lowest in the right ventricle, and it drops as it moves away from the left ventricle. So basically, it's really high when it hits your aorta because it's got to shoot out to all the tissues, and then it drops after it leaves there, okay? And will be the lowest as it returns. The major cardiovascular variable is the mean arterial pressure. So basically, this is your blood pressure. Mean arterial pressure is the product of two factors, cardiac output, which we just talked about a while ago, and also total peripheral resistance. So how hard and how fast is your heart beating, and also what's standing in the way. All right, so how much distance traveled, how thick is your blood, how much blood volume do you have? Okay, so here's the equation. MAP is mean systemic arterial pressure is going to be equal to the cardiac output times the total peripheral resistance. Okay? So I'm trying to see here. I think we can finish this up real quick. Okay? So if you increase your heart rate, okay, think about increasing your heart rate. Remember, cardiac output is stroke volume times heart rate. So if I increase my heart rate, I'm going to increase my blood pressure. Does that make sense? Okay, so if I increase this variable, then this one will increase. If I increase this variable, this one will increase. Does everybody feel good about that?
So it just goes over to the other side.
Right, so like if I have just, let's just write it on the board real quick. Okay, let me erase all this. Oh, no. Oopsie. I'll stop erasing. Okay. So let's just write our little equation here. Mean arterial pressure equals cardiac output times total peripheral resistance. Now, total peripheral resistance, if you look ahead one slide, is going to be based off of three things. So let me show you this and then we'll go back and discuss it. So it's based off of how big the lumen is, like how big open are your blood vessels, how thick is your blood, the blood viscosity, and also how far does it have to travel, the total blood vessel length, okay? So that's what TPR is. How thick is your blood, how big are your blood vessels as far as the lumen goes, and how far it has to travel.